Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I pray that all of you, du'as of afia and barakah for all of you, for everybody listening live and inshallah ta'ala later on to the recording. Today I have with me brother Michael Ibrahim. How do
Michael. Yeah.
I was
Abraham or Ibrahim is fine.
Abraham. The Abraham, just like I was like, oh, I shouldn't have asked you before, but Alhamdulillah, mashallah, one of the people that I look up to sincerely. I learn a lot from. Alhamdulillah, I came to know of you last year with the parenting skills course that you did, which was an amazing, amazing course, mashallah, tabarakallah, and you still have it on your YouTube, and it's free. And I just kept forwarding it to people. I think we should do that again. We should just start telling people, go back to it and learn from it. Alhamdulillah. So Brother Abraham is a professional development trainer, and an educator, a teacher, an author. One of the books that he has written is, mashallah tabarakallah, Engaging Muslim Students in Public Schools. One of your most important works is, so I, as an immigrant parent, really take my sense of what's happening in the education system in the United States from what you're saying, because you're an educator, you're a teacher, you've studied in the public schools, you've been in the public schools since your childhood, and then you've been teaching there. So there are a lot of things that, as immigrant parents, specifically myself, I'm scared of. I don't know the laws. I don't know what's allowed. We have this hyped up idea like we just don't have control over our children. Everyday news, like it like scares us a lot. And one of the reasons why I should homeschool my children, honestly, I did not have the mental capacity to find out the laws. And I was like, you know what, Delaware has the most easiest homeschooling law, just go with it, just go with it. But you did and on your YouTube page, mashallah tabarakallah, again, Abraham Education, please everybody subscribe to that YouTube page. You talk about a lot of topics. You talk about youth, you talk about how to be calm, the two words in the parenting skills, be calm, right? And you talk about the weed problem, the music problem, the anger issues, how to address the youth, how to connect with them. But also then you also talk about what are the rights of Muslim parents sending their children to public school. Those videos are awesome. I put them up on my Instagram post last night. And a lot of what is happening, and the recent live that you did, the future of education, that is what I wanted to emphasize on. Like, what's the future of education? Where are we going? Where are we headed towards? What should the Muslim parents be aware of, etc., etc.? So I've said a lot because I just wanted to hear the rest of it. So Bismillah, over to you.
Yeah, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on, sister. It's really a pleasure to be here. Sorry to your Urdu speaking followers that I can't speak Urdu, but inshallah, I think they can probably understand English pretty well. So, there's a lot to talk about. Why I actually want to talk this idea, this question, what is the future of education? I threw it out there on the live stream. I'm trying to throw it out to people because I just want the Muslims to think about it. Now, only Allah knows what the future holds. I don't know exactly what the future of education holds. But I mean, one thing I think I can say for sure is education in the United States, at least, if not worldwide, is in all types of transition right now.
Yes.
So things are changing in education. And with anything else, as things are changing, the way it's going to change will depend on whoever takes a hold of it. And it's really an opportunity for Muslims to start taking more hold of their child's education. And it's also a responsibility of them as well. And there's really a lot of different angles to talk about. From what I see, certainly, I mean, Muslims have always had an ambivalent relationship with the public school system, as you said. Mixed feelings, not quite sure what to think about it. Lots of anxiety. That is growing. That's growing that's beyond Muslims in the society now, I would say. Like, trust is really broken in the society in general. And the public schools always reflect whatever is going on in the society. So broken trust between the public and public education institutes is really hitting a peak right now. And that's causing many people to take their children out of public schools, especially in really urban centers. It's also causing a lot of professionals within public education to leave. So most people saw something, there's a big talk about teacher shortages this year. That was something I was asked a lot about. there's kind of a dual phenomenon going on there. I'm in a district in Minneapolis Public Schools, like many urban center districts, that is losing lots of students, and it's been losing students since before the pandemic. The pandemic has compounded the problem. And what's odd, though, is especially in the states that are liberal states run by the Democratic Party, and this is a whole thing with Muslim parents, like, education is really not just one thing, and public education is really not just one thing in the United States, because it depends on local politics quite a bit, not just state level, but even the municipal or city level. What we're seeing in these, but being in the North, more liberal states, Delaware is a more liberal state. There's lots of families leaving these large urban districts, and then the state Democratic parties are keeping the funding going in these districts. So those districts are not necessarily losing teachers quite like other districts are, because even though they're losing students, meanwhile, you have students who are maybe going out to the suburbs, or they're going out to charter schools or something like this. And those schools aren't necessarily getting more teacher applicants. One, because just progressively for a long time now, less people have been going into education and studying teaching. Number two, it's been a statistic a long time in teaching that people who get a teaching license, 50% of them quit teaching after 30 years. So even if you look at the amount of people who get a teaching license in the United States, less than half, only about half of them stay in teaching with any longevity. But you have some districts where their numbers are actually growing, but they're mostly getting students who are coming from the more urban centers. And it's certainly the case in liberal states that funding that's coming from the state governments is keeping the teachers union happy in these large school districts, which is allowing them to keep their staffing levels at the same number, even though they're losing students. So it's a really odd thing. Like, there's some districts where they're really struggling with class size, they're struggling with having substitute teachers. Then there's other schools and places where it's the complete opposite. They might have a class of 5, 6, 7 students with 2 teachers in it. So the whole thing is torn into chaos. I've been asked a lot, like, what's causing teachers to leave the profession? And there's really a lot to that, because there were, the pandemic really just brought out problems that already existed in education. I would say the core of which is just the lack of meaning in public education. And as much as we worry about the news item issues, as you said, which are areas of concern, and that concern with those areas has increased this past year as well, which I can talk more about if you'd like me to. But, I do try to tell Muslim students, some that are Muslim families, something that doesn't really get in the news. I always tell people the bigger problem with public education is not as much what kids are learning, as much as it is that they're just not learning anything at all. And I do have some longer podcasts on this on my channel. I did a stream on it last year on the channel of Sajid Lifham. Inshallah, I'm going to do a more in-depth presentation on this on the YouTube channel Blog and Theology at some point this summer. But American education has really suffered from failed pedagogical methodology for a long time. Pedagogy meaning methods of teaching. They've really adopted failed methods of teaching for a long time that have become very, very popular in these school districts. And they've been going on so long that it's really contributed to what they call the achievement gap in the United States. And it's really disheartened people, because core to it is they really don't teach knowledge in schools a lot. Like, they'll always talk about skills and teaching kids skills and skills-based education. And there's an extent to which you teach skills, but it's known scientifically, and it's certainly known by the most thorough research done in the field of education, which ironically the teaching schools in America happen to ignore, that you can't really learn skills in a specific field apart from having good knowledge in that field. And because American society is so politicized and so divided, the idea of teaching knowledge itself is politicized in public schools. So you will have, like, if you actually look at the structure of education across all the states, they all adopt what you call standards. They don't adopt a curriculum. They adopt what they call standards. And if you read these standards for each subject area, you'll find that they don't really call for teachers to teach any specific facts or knowledge that kids need to know. Generally, science and math a little different with that. But what they call teachers to do is to teach skills, these kind of abstract skills, and it's really based on found instruction. Failed instructional theory in education, and also again just the fact that if you put Republicans and Democrats in a room together and ask them what should we teach our kids, they'll never agree on it. So it's almost a thing that's happened in American education as a way to avoid someone choosing the knowledge that we should teach. So that's the more pervasive thing. Like there's not really a meaning and a strong purpose and good knowledge learning that our kids are undertaking in these public schools. What happens with that is school ends up just becoming a social environment for kids. It ends up becoming and actually the failed methodologies, it's a little bit to get into, but a lot of these failed methodologies, they want teachers to make classrooms that look really dynamic. Like you have kids working in groups, you have kids working on projects, you have kids looking, having discussions. Because, you see kids doing something smart looking like that, it makes everyone feel good. But, trying to jump to that stuff too quickly isn't really consistent with how kids actually learn. They have to intake a lot before they do that stuff. And a lot of times you have in schools kids getting set up in this types of structure, and they're not really doing good work, and they just end up socializing all day. So the peer culture and the adolescent culture and the popular culture of America just ends up taking these kids over when they're in these places, and there's nothing really intervening with it.
So what needs to shift? So I come from an Eastern culture. I'm a Pakistani by ethnicity, and I grew up in schools and colleges that were taught by South Asian teachers, Indian and Pakistani, Sri Lankan, Bangladeshi, all of those, right? And we have a set system. We are more focused on memorization of
Right.
stuff and then testing, a lot of testing. Same like Chinese, right? We say that we push that too much a bit, and then this popular hip culture comes, like what you said. It looks so nice, children working in groups, but then if it's just about skills and it's not about knowledge, and ours is like taking too much knowledge but learning
Right.
less skills, what is the middle path then?
Yeah, there is a middle path, and finding the middle path is important. So I've known many people who've had the exact experience that you're describing.
Yeah.
They had a negative experience of education in the Eastern world, with it maybe being too pedantic, like too focused on just memorizing facts that maybe didn't matter as much.
Yeah,
Maybe
I think it was helpful because our rote memorization and our ability to take information and sync it is way better,
I know,
and it helped us.
I know, and similar to how progressive social movements in America change social values.
Yeah.
The progressive social movement in America very, very much affected teacher colleges in American history. Really starting in the early 20th century with a educational philosopher by the name of John Dewey, who's well known to anyone who studied education in the United States. If you went to a library back in the day, they used to organize the books on a system that he invented called the Dewey Decimal System. He was extremely anti-traditionalist in his pedagogical theory and approach. So, what offshooted from that is you have in the American teacher colleges really taking on an ethos that anything that looks like traditional education is eo ipso bad, means just bad in and of itself. And memorization really went along with that. Now, memorization, you can spend too much time on it. It can be taken to an extreme, but a lot of it is actually the foundation of learning is memorization.
Yes.
And this is something that I teach public school educators about, because at the same time with the progressive social values, there is this big movement in education to respect minorities and all that type of thing. So I do find educators, they're willing to listen to me talk about the learning history of Muslims and the cultural learning practices of Muslims, but then they feel conflicted when I tell them the cultural learning methods that Muslim children and Muslim families are used to are actually the more traditional stuff that you were told in teacher college wasn't a good idea to do, while at the same time they were telling you to respect the culture of families, of these minority families. Then they feel conflicted. But in that, like where education is, it's really a time where, number one, Muslims should have confidence about taking ownership over their kids' education again, whether that means going into homeschooling or going to the private schools. There's all kinds of resources to do it. Some of the resources that do exist are still based on these flawed methodologies. But, families maybe shouldn't be afraid of their intuition, I would say, in a way, if they're looking to teach their kids more. I know that enrollment is increasing in Islamic private schools. I know that, I have been reached out to by more institutions than I can count, like mosques, who are looking to maybe, the problem we actually have in the Muslim community is we don't have enough education expertise in general. We don't have enough people who are in the field, and not that you necessarily need a degree to teach someone. I don't believe that. That was actually part of what I was trying to show in that parenting course that I did last summer. Like the fundamental skills of teaching, it really is something that anybody can learn. Yes. And then you get good at it with practice. So, a lot of times you're not good at it when you start, but if you have some direction in what you're doing and you get refined with it, you'll improve. For the Islamic private schools, they don't have to hire licensed people, but the demand for Islamic private schools is definitely increasing. There is an array of mosques in the country right now who want to do something where, especially in lower income areas, which are our community here in Minnesota is compared to a lot of other communities, we're low socioeconomic status Muslim community because it's refugees take up such a large portion of it with all the East Africans that we have here. There's really one fully functioning private Islamic school in the Twin Cities that has 500 seats. And then we have at least 50,000 Muslim kids in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So we have one Islamic private school seat for every 100 Muslim kids. So like a lot of mosques are thinking about doing something. Well, let's have the kids, they'll stay in the mosque. We'll get some moms or whoever to supervise, and we'll have them do an online program or stuff. There is things to do that. There's some Islamic schools. I know one out of Maryland called Bain that's doing like an Islamic private school. They're specifically working with mosques to set up an online program with that type of thing. As far as the future of education, a movement that has definitely taken place since COVID, kids are on screens all day, every day. Like it is honestly just ridiculous.
It is.
And it's in the schools. And it's another thing that it's not research based. I have a video on my YouTube channel. I think I did it like last December about what research shows about reading on digital screens versus reading on paper. And it, again, long term, overwhelmingly, it shows people learn to read better and they comprehend reading better when it's read on paper. And this is something that's been studied since the 1980s. And the results of that result has actually only gotten more as people have gotten on screens more. And the thing is, too, when they do these studies and they ask the people who they assess, who are young people, either college graduates or college aged or younger, they'll do like a comparative study where they have them read something on a screen and then read something on paper and do like an assessment of it. People will think that they read better on the screen, but the results of their assessment actually show that they read better on paper. Yeah. So, this whole thing, like every kid either has a Chromebook or an iPad, and that's the basis of what they do school on now. That is not something that came as the result of like, well, this is what sound research and a good pedagogical theory says, and this is what's best for the kids. This is completely a movement pitched by the tech industries. Completely. Yes. Google and Apple completely pushing this on the school districts, and even Microsoft was doing it well before that.
Yeah.
And the thing is like using Google, every school uses Google Classroom now. That is very like tempting for the teacher. Like it makes teaching really easy. You don't have to print out paper anymore or anything. You don't have to go through notebooks.
Saves time.
Yes, you can just a few clicks, few types of them. You got an assignment up, you got a reading up. You can give kids assignments forever, whatever. Then the kids on their end will all do it behind the screen. The method, the kids have been cheating for a long time with Google and stuff. That is going through the roof now. And, of course, AI has a whole role in that. And AI, I'm not against AI or ChatGPT or anything. I think it's a kind of a cool tool. But, of course, schools should use it in a productive way where you're trying to teach kids how to use it. And public schools in general, they just can't make that type of transition very well. And, so it's more the intuition of teachers like, well, how do we, detect, copying with this as opposed to trying to teach them in a better way. So, I mean, just getting back to the idea of like, Muslims should feel a sense of urgency and a sense of empowerment about taking hold of the kids' education more, whether it means homeschooling or sending them to an Islamic private school. Getting yourself involved with an Islamic private school. A lot of young people out there who are just finishing up their bachelor's degree or something, private schools can hire someone to be a teacher without a teaching license. That is
Yes.
that is a great area of flexibility that they have.
Yes.
So a lot of times younger people looking to get jobs in this type of stuff, that might be a good area to look at. And with increased demand, more Islamic private schools are going to be looking at that because we don't have a whole lot of qualified teachers overall in the Muslim community because we always prioritize medicine and engineering and accounting or an IT or whatever for the jobs for everything. So, like there's ways that we can contribute, and I just emphasize that because as I think whether I tell people to or not, Muslims are going to be taking more control over their kids' education. But I do think it's also a trap if we take that to just mean I'm going to have them on a computer all day and the program on the computer is going to do it. Like all this screen time, the kids don't need this much screen time, even if they're living in a screen-based world. They don't need this much screen time. It's not good for them. And we want to learn how to still teach them ourselves because that's what's going to be best for them. And really with all this mess in public education, if we go back to our Islamic roots and values, we look to the guidance from the Quran, the Sunnah, to show us how we should teach our kids. We can find a method of teaching kids, I think, within all this that can make Islamic institutions lead the way even in what education should look like in the future.
Brother Abraham, one of the divides that I found, like when I sent my children to Islamic school, alhamdulillah, in Delaware, like the area that I live in, we have two, not one. We have two Islamic schools. Good, mashallah, good people, good school, alhamdulillah, serving the community well.
Mhm.
But what I found was that we're always lacking funds.
Mhm.
We always never have a playground. We don't have labs. And the higher socioeconomic families, the children of doctors and engineers and lawyers and IT tech people, they say we immigrated to America to get higher, good quality education.
Yeah, I know.
And so,
they got duped.
yes. So the Islamic schools are not well established, or they're not competent enough
Yeah,
to
I
teach
know.
children
I
the
know.
education. I know, of course I know that you know. But for the sake of the listener, this is the argument that people don't invest in Islamic schools or don't send their children to Islamic schools. And for some people, they just take their problem children, behavioral issue children, and they throw them in Islamic schools thinking that this is going to fix everything. When you said that parents have to take back control of educating their children, that means the parents need. So as a life coach, as a parent coach, the number one thing that I am seeing is that even today in the morning at 7:30 a.m. I had a coaching call. Parents, we have lost our confidence. Like even myself, sometimes I just ask myself, like, am I good enough to teach my child? Am I good enough to am I not broken? Because of course all the adults are also addicted to screens, and they're addicted to the easy lifestyle. So sending a child away is much easier than keeping them or teaching or learning with them. Now, what was the question here? The question here is, with all the work that you're doing, and like you're saying, the Islamic schools are going to be on the rise, and you have and you also have to mention how one of the religious charter schools has been mandated in one of the states, and what that means for Islamic schools.
Yeah.
How do you make the Muslim parents, number one, gain their confidence, number two, realize that they do not have to be in that rut reel of sending their children to where they're just, and because there are so many cases that come, oh, my child does not even want to talk to me, my child is always on the screen, my child locks the door, my child doesn't respond to me, my child has removed her hijab, my child doesn't want to be a Muslim anymore. Like the Islamic identity, Muslim identity crisis. I don't know how you will manage to answer like 50 questions that I asked, but bismillah.
Well, look, we can spend all day
Yes.
always worrying about the attitudes that people have, and there are attitude problems and that show themselves in the Muslim community across different Muslim communities. One attitude problem is the inferiority complex, which I think you kind of touched on, the feeling that you're not good enough, it has to be someone else to do it. we could probably dissect all day where that comes from, and I think, the countries that have been really colonized,
Yes.
which certainly South Asia has such a long history of that. Like, I do get that feeling like sometimes South Asians will never believe that they can do something as well as someone with a British or American accent or that type of thing, you know?
Yes. That's absolutely
And, I mean, of course, I'm Arab, but I reverted. My father's an Arab Christian. So, I've been inside you know, the non-Muslims from the inside out with families. And this whole thing is really misplaced. Actually, too, something I meant to mention, I mostly teach East African kids, but I consult with schools that have kids from an array of places in the Muslim community. And then there's other diverse schools in my district that I've been at too. It is extreme. It's almost predictable that a kid who comes to our schools, who immigrates at like, say, 7th, 8th grade, just before high school, and they've been educated somewhere in the Muslim world, particularly like Kenya. Kenya is what I deal with. Kids that I intake from Kenya, they always read and do math better than the kids who went to school here.
not sure.
And with India and Pakistan, that is certainly the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that whole we have the problem of the inferiority complex on one end, and then the elitist attitude on another end. Like, both those things are problems in certain areas of the Muslim community, and and sometimes they go together. So like the elitist attitude that kind of thumbs its nose at the idea of Islamic private schools, that thinks that, I mean, it's very superficial. Just looking at the material gain of the West. And look, yes, a lot of these schools, especially the suburban schools, they have a lot of money put into them. They have very big buildings, they have nice facilities, all that type of stuff. But the advent of garbage teaching being pervasive in the United States has gone on for a while. Look, I would tell those elitist types, look up the book, The Knowledge Gap by Deborah Wexler, I believe is her name. Look up the book Why Knowledge Matters by Edie Hirsch. There was a podcast done recently. There is actually starting to be some momentum in American education towards changing the methods of reading instruction, because they have been such garbage for a long time. And there are people within American academia and Western academia who push back on what pervades, but they're really a minority voice, because the progressive teaching methods that I described are so favored by people in the academic institutions who tend to favor progressive social values as well. But the more robust academics in education, they have been pushing back on this and calling for more traditional type education. And there's books you can read on that. Another book, boy, I have to look up the name of it. There's more recent things coming up about based on neurology study.
Yes.
Like brain-based learning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it is showing the same thing.
Yes.
That these kind of fancy types methods that these schools like to broadcast and advertise, they don't really work. They can make for good pictures that you can put on the school website, and good videos.
It was just recently that I read that how memorization is so important. And then I was like, I was taught during my certification program here that you are not supposed to push the child and let them play. And play is good. Yes, play is definitely good in pre-K and kindergarten, but then you are supposed to teach them too. And I felt shame thinking that, oh my God, I'm going to damage my kid if I push for them to memorize anything, because that's not how they learn. But then I saw how children up until from K to 6th, 5th grade were like fine. And then suddenly there's so much load of study. Children are depressed. They feel lost. They have identity crisis along with feeling low with their grades. And suddenly you ask them like, what happened? And they say like, there's too much homework. Like, really too much homework? What is actually happening? I can't remember stuff. I can't memorize stuff because they were never taught how to learn.
Well, not only that, but they also didn't get foundational knowledge when they were in elementary school. That book I said, Why Knowledge Matters by Edie Hirsch, he talks extensively about that. How especially the social studies and language arts curriculum in elementary school is just a bunch of fluff.
Yes.
Kids can start learning history at age 6, real history. They have enough of a concept of past and present to start then. But you only get bits and pieces of it, in like starting like 5th, 6th grade in elementary school in the United States. So yeah, when it does get more demanding, and the secondary school teachers in middle and high school, they do a different licensing than elementary education.
Mhm.
So the elementary school teachers, they honestly don't learn much knowledge at all themselves in reality, but they learn a lot about, the social emotional
Mhm.
well-being of the child. They learn things about psychology, and they learn how to, again, do these creative methods without any knowledge attached to it. When you get to middle and high school, you at least have teachers who specialize in some area, and they themselves have some type of passion for that area. So they might want to impart some knowledge on that area, even though they'll be told not to by the professional development programs a lot of these schools are putting them through. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the most common complaints amongst teachers in high school, especially how unprepared the kids are when they show up.
Yeah.
And it's from exactly what you're talking about. Like going back to what I was saying before about kind of the elite class in the Muslim community. There's really a desire I see amongst that class of professionals in the Muslim community that they want to be very comfortable and they want to have some status within the established institutions of American society. And that is all well and good and fine, and we need to have a presence within those institutions. But I would say if you're going into those institutions and all you're doing is parroting what they are telling you, or you're just, you're not offering any you're not offering them any of the wisdom that we have to offer as Muslims, you're not really contributing at all. You're not giving the best contribution that you can, and you're actually missing an opportunity to become a better leader in those places. This is why the schools, this is, and having a more critical eye like this that I had in looking at pedagogy, because I teach about this in my professional development.
Yes. Mhm.
And that look at that criticism that I was able to develop of it and find the research that wasn't what we were taught in teacher training, but does exist in the field that validates the better type of learning. That has allowed me to get into leadership roles with institutions in my professional development because I looked at it with that critical eye. So I encourage Muslims, whatever field you're in to do that, because I think a lot of academic fields and professional institutions in the United States are suffering from this.
They absolutely are. So just to recap and then move forward towards like what should the institutions be, like Muslim Islamic institutions, because I honestly believe wholeheartedly in homeschooling, but then again with the socioeconomic status, not all families are able to homeschool their children, right? And if I see how blessed I am, then I am homeschooling my children, but they're actually online schooled. I'm not teaching them anything, right? Again, that's a privilege, and I see that, and I'm grateful for that. But not everybody can have that same path.
Right.
So let's circle back to Islamic schools. Okay, so what's the future? Let's say there's an average income family. One parent works, one does not work, and they're taking care of the children, the upbringing and tarbiyah and all of that. And they want to send their child to an Islamic school, depending on which state they are in. Or they're young parents, their children are just like very young and they're very passionate about Islamic schooling, like I was, like my husband was when our children were younger.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that we need to look into to establish better Islamic schools? Number one. Number two, the thing that you wanted to talk about, like how it's changing for charter Muslim schools, Islamic schools,
Sure.
and is there hope?
Well, there's hope. There's definitely hope.
Alhamdulillah.
So look, short and long term, look, whether you're going to homeschool or go to an Islamic private school, we need to get more confident and better with kids as Muslims in general.
Yes.
And I talked about it in the parenting course I did last summer. Like you have to make this transition from parenting back home, where it was a more collective society, and everyone's more on the same page what they're going to reinforce to the kids, where the society is more individualistic. So on an individual level, you have to be able to be good with kids, and you can't rely on this social net of values and reinforcements. You have to get kids to buy into following you just as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, I mean, I've seen it too. Lots of Muslim parents, they're not confident about that. But whether it's in homeschooling or in the Islamic private schools, we need to sharpen and improve in those skills. Now, the reason I put that parenting course together last summer is because anyone can acquire those skills. They can. And I tried to put it in that parenting course. Now, I will tell you, it is free on a playlist on my YouTube channel for right now. I've had it up for a year. It's not exact, it's like a learning course. I tried, and I live streamed it. but I tried to do it like you would do an online learning course. That type of material doesn't exactly like fly in the YouTube algorithm. So I do have a plan to take it down, at least most of it, and put it behind a paywall so I can reinvest the money into advertising for it, because I'm really a believer that needs to spread, and it's just not going to do it. It's just not going to do it on its own.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to check that out. I myself am transitioning from focusing less on doing trainings with public schools to doing it more with Islamic private schools. I have established partnership with at least 3 private schools in here, Virginia, Minnesota, Virginia, and Maryland, and I'm in talks with other ones to try to develop these skills in the schools already. But parents can learn it. So that's just the big thing, short and long term. We just have to get better with our skills with kids. It's not too hard. There's concrete, applicable things you can learn that you will get better with over time, and just having a commitment, and getting better with anything. There's somewhat of a trial and error process. It's a reflective process. It takes a certain mindset, all that type of stuff. So people following you, and I think they're equipped to do that because you're at least already in tune to something where we're trying to talk about these things. Just these skills and our confidence with kids needs to get better across the board, and that will help with everything. And again, we need to rely on what works best, which will correlate to our religion. It won't clash against it, even though sometimes we tell ourselves that can't be. Now, long term with Islamic private schools and funding, it's difficult for families. I know Islamic private schools are feeling the increase in demand, so they might be trying to do what they can to come up with different methods. What you said about charter schools, long term, first of all, like there's a lot of things going on politically right now in the country, like because the push for more school choice is really gaining momentum in the United States, not just amongst Muslims. There's been a movement. The charter schools in general are part of the school choice movement. It was kind of believed to be part of a compromise. The state of Arizona, for example, they passed a universal voucher system. So now the state money for each kid, it no longer goes directly to schools. It actually goes to parents, and they can choose to apply it to any school they want to send their kid to. A district school, charter school, private school, in-home tutoring, as they like. They can use it however they want. Ohio is close to passing something fairly similar. Not exactly, but fairly similar. With charter schools, 46 states in the country have a charter school system.
Yeah.
And I have videos on it on my channel, but in the summer of 2022, there were significant rulings made by the U.S. Supreme Court in some cases that have opened the door for the charter school system to have to fund religious schools. Essentially, because if people don't know the difference, because sometimes people say public school and charter school, it's basically been a debate throughout their existence for the 30 years charter schools have been around as to whether or not they are public schools or the extent to which they're public schools. Now, they're paid for by taxpayer dollars, so they're public in that sense. However, they are not public the way a school district is public. Why? Because a school district is governed by a school board, and the school board is elected by votes by the public. So that makes them as public as the state legislature is, as the governor is, as the president of the United States is, whoever. It's purely public. Charter schools are not that. They are given funds from the state to run a school, but it's private citizens who are running the school, and they just go through the application process. They're not voted in. Now, in the United States case law, when you have public funds that are available to be acquired by private citizens or private companies, that is what you call in the United States case law a neutral public benefit. And it is a general rule with neutral public benefits. You can't discriminate on the basis of race, religion, gender, just like everything else in the United States.
Yeah.
But for some reason, charter schools have actually always discriminated against religious people and religious institutions, because the initial charter school law that was written in the state of Minnesota in 1992, it specifically had a clause about the schools can't be sectarian. And then when every other charter school law was adopted, it was based off of that law, and they all say that. But Oklahoma has officially struck, their governor and attorney general basically have officially struck that down based on new rulings from the Supreme Court. So they approved a Catholic charter school just a few weeks ago. And next year there will be a religious charter school run in the state of Oklahoma that will be the first such school in the country. Now, of course, Oklahoma is a more Republican state. So will other states allow that where they're more Democratic leaning? Not likely. However, and we are working on some things. I'm working with a specific organization which is actually an umbrella organization. I'm working with the Religious Freedom Institute in Washington, D.C., and we have a very well-established law firm that will work pro bono on this with us. So we are going to apply for an Islamic charter school here in the state of Minnesota, and we'll get rejected, but then we are planning to go through the litigation process.
Right.
And inshallah, if we have to, this could take years, but inshallah, if we have to take it all the way to the Supreme Court to get, and if it does go to the Supreme Court, they will rule in our favor, inshallah, based on its current makeup, to make this established in the Democratic states as well. And we might not even need to go through that process, because there is another case that is in the appellate court. This is all a lot to talk about. I have more on my channel. But there could be rulings from the Supreme Court as soon as this year, if not next year, that establish it without doubt that these charter schools can't be considered fully public institutions, and that they can't discriminate, and that the funding for them can't discriminate against religious institutions. So this is really a huge opportunity. In Minnesota, we need this badly. We have over 24 schools in the Twin Cities area that are 24 charter schools that are almost all Muslim kids, mostly East African, like 99%, because they're trying to escape the district schools, but and the families can't afford to send to a private school, the refugee families. So the need for it in places like Minnesota, other places, are just so obvious, and I really think it's going to be the thing that it will be the release valve that we need to make a big transition. Because once that happens, in an instance, you could have 46 states, and the states that don't have charter school systems, they have some type of voucher system where you can already get public funds for a private school. Right. So I really think this is going to be a huge transitional thing in American education in this decade that will take place. And inshallah, it will allow us to start Islamic private schools and have public funding for it. And we need to understand this, and we need to be ready for it. How do we get ready for it? By getting good at teaching ourselves and getting good with kids ourselves.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallahu khair. Thank you so much. Because the last part, even with the technique, and you made it so simple for everybody to understand. So Jazakallahu khair. True teacher here, true teaching skills. Alhamdulillah. But mashallah, tabarakallah. It's hopeful now. Alhamdulillah. It's such a relief, because I felt this. I felt this as a parent coach, and as coaching immigrant parents, and having these calls, and where children are going through so much. Of course, COVID just outdid the whole depression, stress thing, and the screen times that you mentioned. But losing your identity and not connecting with just the basic adab and the softness, everything is just.
Oh yeah. This, the pure culture of America, it turns kids it makes kids afraid to be humble. It makes them afraid to be vulnerable. And actually, the only kids who can be like that are kids who really have a strong connection with their parents. Yes. And me teaching in school, I can tell a lot of times within the first day, but certainly in the first week, I can tell which kids in my class are more orientated towards their peers, and which ones are more orientated towards their parents, because you just see it in their manners. And in American society, even parents who are good people with strong values themselves and all that type of thing, their kids will get sucked up into being more orientated towards their peers. Absolutely. If they really don't tend to having a good connection with the child, having a consistent connection, you have to structure your family in a certain way and prioritize things in a certain way to maintain your connection with your kid. Because the type of things you're describing, these are parents who they've been parenting in a way, but they weren't really maintaining the emotional connection with their child over time. It can just happen by going through life. And as adults, we have so many different things to worry about, so many things we're stressed about, as far as just keeping the roof over the head and keeping food on the table. And adults too, we experience time quicker than kids do, because your mind is literally more selective about what you choose to remember as you get older. This is why older people, they only remember the things that are most important in their life and most impactful in life and most important and impactful about life. Whereas younger people, they take in a lot and they remember a lot. So a lot of times parents don't realize, like, a year goes by and their child is literally experiencing more going on in life than they are as an adult. So, like, it might just seem like the days are going by to you as an adult, but for the kid, a whole lot is happening, and it feels really big, and it might just be happening inside their mind. So, you really have to make family space on a daily basis. You have to make time for family connection on a daily basis, and the preventative measures are so much better than the surgery methods, or the trying to repair things after the damage is already done with this type of thing.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. This was a very, very important part again. If you have not heard us from the beginning to the end, just go back to Brother Abraham's YouTube channel, Abraham Education, and go through the parenting skills section that he put up last year. I attended most of them live, Alhamdulillah, and then I went back and then I um listened to the recordings as well. I learned a lot. It helped me in my skills as well, as a teacher, as an educator, as a homeschooler, and as a parent coach too. So Jazakallah khair to you. Alhamdulillah. So do you connect with the public, or now you're just too busy with other stuff, that the more important stuff that you're doing? Like,
So
do you consult?
you cut out on me a little bit. You say, do I connect with the public?
Yeah, like, do you do consultation work with parents, or
Yeah, yeah.
just
Oh, yeah.
okay? So how do
In the description box of most of my videos, I have a link to schedule a meeting with me. That is something, a lot of that stuff, I'm going to be putting it behind the paywalls, just because, I mean, I'm going to be teaching significantly less. I might not teach at all in a public school next year. I might go out of it completely. At least I'm going to be very much significantly reducing it. So I'm kind of transitioning myself and my work, and I need some extra support. But also, as far as my social media following, like I said, that parenting course, it is something people really need, and I do really want it to spread. So I'm starting to ask people for some funds and to support me with a membership, this type of thing, and I will give them, extra courses and lessons and this type of stuff that they can get through video format, through the membership, and also private consultations, this type of stuff. But I have a link in my description box where people can book a call with me. But I just want to give a warning. I might make I might make new people who aren't in my network already, at least, start paying for that in the future, just because I'm tight on time like everybody else.
No, definitely. And you should do that. You should definitely do that. Alhamdulillah, Allahumma barik. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your time and your effort and everything that you're doing. What you're doing is so important. It's going to affect all of us, and our children and the children after them and the generations to come. So you're doing a sadaqah jariyah for the Muslim ummah here in the United States of America. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your work, bless your knowledge, increase you in it, ease give you easy people, and give you lots of success. I mean, Jazakallah khair, Brother Abraham. Thank you so much for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.